Hello there and welcome to the very first video of my 2019 100-day drawing challenge. So very recently I posted two parts of a video looking through my sketchbook from last year where I almost completed 100 days of drawing every single day. And I decided I wanted to embark on that journey again this year. I'm incredibly nervous and excited to be doing this challenge again. So this year I'm using the same prompts that I wrote last year. So I started this challenge and did my first drawing on the 15th of September, and the first prompt was "A new challenge awaits." So I had to try and think of what I wanted to draw for this particular prompt. I didn't want to do an exact repeat of what I did last year, and with most of these prompts I was really struggling to think of something completely new without just redrawing what I did last year. But I came up with a much different idea and instead was inspired by my preparation for this challenge. So I've been preparing for this for a short while, making sure I had my prompt list already, and I had to buy 2 new sketchbooks for it, and I've written up a schedule for how to post these videos. This first drawing was inspired by that, so I didn't particularly want to draw myself, so instead I drew my original character, who still technically doesn't have a name. I sketched him out kind of rushing around, carrying loads of stuff, like I just mentioned, the prompt list, the sketchbooks, the schedule, a little pencil case too with little pencils and pens flying out everywhere. A little bit later on, once I had started colouring, I decided to add a camera tripod under his arm too, like he's carrying it around. And I thought this would just be a cute little idea for the very first drawing. It took me a little while to get all of the proportions looking right, but then once I did, I moved straight onto the colouring. So I used 2 different blue colours and kind of blended them together to create his fur colour. And I just wrote 100-day drawing challenge at the top and bottom of the page just to indicate that that is the new challenge that I'm embarking on now. Other than that, I don't have too much to say about this first prompt. It was just kind of easing me into the challenge. So then on the 16th of September, I did prompt number 2, which was draw something old from your Instagram. So I picked this cute witch character. I really liked the original drawing that I did. So the original version of this drawing I posted to Instagram on the 18th of February 2018. And I really like the original. I like its simplicity, I like the colours, and I liked the concept. The idea behind the original one was just this kind of thought that I had that if you had like magical powers or something, you probably wouldn't read a book by like holding it. So I just had this picture in my head of this witch character walking around doing this and that and reading a book as she goes, because she's just able to kind of magically hold it in front of her and like magically flip the pages without actually having to hold it. And I just thought it was a cute idea, so I wanted to recreate it fairly similarly. But there were a couple of little things that I changed. Obviously I changed the proportions quite a bit. I coloured it a little bit differently. I changed the dress just a little bit, like the neckline I wanted to be different. I'm not 100% sure why. I think I just wanted to add a little bit of a different flair to it. But other than that, I just tried to improve upon it as much as I could. I still added the glitter elements of the magic spell that's going on. I used glitter in the original drawing and I wanted to do exactly the same thing again with this one. And I'm pretty happy with how this ended up turning out. I quite like the colouring overall. This was fairly simple colour palette. It's just purple and pink and black, I think, are really the only main colours that were used. I just kind of coloured and shaded it the way that I normally would. I did go in with coloured pencils in the end and add a little bit of extra shading here and there because I felt like it really needed it and I didn't really have enough depth going on. This is probably one of my favourites that I've done so far. I remember when sketching this I was pretty discouraged at one point because I felt like it was really not going well, but then I think I managed to pull it back and I'm actually really happy with this, so it ended up all okay in the end. Prompt number 3 on the 17th of September was fruit, and again this was another one that I really didn't want to end up making like a carbon copy of what I did last year, and I really like my drawing from last year, so I struggled for a little bit to even come up with a concept that looked hugely different from last year, and in some ways I still prefer last year's drawing. I think I added some more creative ideas, but I just kind of started to sketch and started to draw the outline of a person. I tried to make the pose a little bit dynamic because for some reason when I think of fruit I think of like being energetic. I'm not sure exactly why, but I knew that I didn't want it to be a really still pose. And I think in hindsight I probably could have made it even better or pushed it even further, but I'm not super disappointed with how it turned out. Once I had just started to sketch and just kind of went with the flow of the drawing, I ended up coming up with something as I went along. I knew that I wanted to use a lot of bright colours because, of course, for a fruit prompt, I wanted to use a lot of different bright colours, especially the kind of citrus fruit colours, the green, yellow, orange, because I love that colour combination. I did throw in a little bit of bright pink too, for that like watermelon theme, but I really like how this turned out in the end. Again, there's a lot of things that I would do differently. If I could go back in time, I suppose I would try and make it probably even more energetic or even bigger, or add a few more creative ideas in. So overall, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. I did go in and shade it with coloured pencils because I love doing that, and I added all the little white details and elements to the little fruits on her shirt and in her hair so that you could really tell what they were. Prompt number 4 on the 18th was nature. This was another one where I couldn't really get the idea out of my head of what I drew last year, and I'm not sure, again like the fruit one, I'm not sure I created something that's necessarily better for the prompt than last year's, but I certainly like the artwork better. Again, I was really just trying to sketch something that kind of was proportioned okay, and then once I managed to get that down on the page, I started adding all the little nature elements to it. So I knew I wanted to use a lot of green. I really like the colour that I used for the hair. I think it looks really pretty. And then I drew some flowers too, because that's kind of reminds me of a nature theme. So I drew her holding a bunch of flowers, which I had completely forgotten what the prompt after this was. So you'll see when I get to that, but I ended up drawing more flowers again. I really like how this ended up, but I feel like the majority of that is due to the shading, because this was looking pretty boring, if I'm honest, before I went in with the coloured pencils. So I went in with pencils and I went over a lot of different elements, and I like the little touches of green that I added into the skin and the hair. I like the little touches of green on her eyes and around her eyes, and I just think it ended up looking a lot prettier once I'd added that range of colours, because it was looking pretty flat beforehand. But I'm glad that it ended up being one that I really like, even though I wasn't sure it was going to end up particularly good. It ended up okay in the end. So like I said, I forgot what this prompt was going to be before I got there, but prompt number 5 on the 19th was bouquet, or bouquet, I never know how to say that. So I ended up drawing even more flowers. So I didn't want it to be exactly like the one previous, because in the nature drawing I drew quite brightly coloured flowers, so I tried to go for a slightly different colour scheme with this one. And again, I was really struggling to think of a really big idea to do for this, and again, I didn't want to draw exactly the same as what I did last year, so after a little bit of thinking, I ended up going with something quite simple. I added a little bit of extra effort into the flowers to try and make them look as good as possible. I used some reference images. I looked up a lot of different reference images and kind of merged them all together to come up with my own thing, but I'm not fantastic at drawing flowers, so this was some good practice. And I'm glad that I used some references to try and actually make it look like an arrangement rather than just I was throwing flowers on there as an extra detail. And I kept the rest of it quite simple. I kept the character quite simple, what she's wearing is very simple, just because I wanted the attention to be on those flowers. They still don't look fantastic because, like I said, I'm not very practiced at drawing flowers, I'm not great at it, but overall I still really like this. It is really simple. I think I at least managed to pull something together that looks good for what it is, but not particularly the most interesting thing. Prompt number 6 on the 20th is ice cream. So because I'd done a couple of prompts previously that were quite simple, I did try and go a little bit bigger with this one, a little bit bolder, a little bit more on the page. So again, I didn't know what I was going to do for this because all I had in my head was last year's drawing. So I really wanted to make it different. I did do some similar ideas to last year, because I'm absolutely in love with the kind of like ice cream on a head idea. I don't know why, but I thought it was really cute. So I decided to reuse that idea, but then created a whole different image with it. So I focused more on the character instead of having her like sitting like in a bowl of ice cream, I think I did last year. I instead gave her this like drippy dress effect and had her holding this huge ice cream. I think it's really cute actually. It ended up not coming out exactly as I wanted it to, but I'm not necessarily disappointed about how it did come out. I originally wanted to use all pastel colours again like I did last year, but I ended up accidentally using some that were a little bit too dark, but I'm not necessarily disappointed. When I was colouring it, I started off using some pastel colours for the skin, but then when I got to the dress, I ended up shading it with a colour that's actually quite dark, and I didn't realise how dark it was going to be. But I tried to blend it in the best I could, and I think it ended up looking fine. It's just not as pale as I originally wanted it to be. And then I decided to throw in some bright pinks here and there, like in the hair and on the bow on the front of her dress, just to make it a bit brighter, because I'd kind of already accidentally made it too dark by using a dark colour on the dress. So I just thought, well, we'll make it bright instead. And I think it worked out really good. Again, this was another one that was looking kind of plain and boring until I got to the pencils. I absolutely am obsessed with going in and shading it with coloured pencils, because I think it adds so much more dimension to the image and just really makes it vibrant and adds a lot more shading to it. I also went in with a white pen and did a lot of highlights because the prompt was ice cream. I thought everything's going to have to be shiny and drippy and cool. So I really had a lot of fun with this one and just allowed myself to do a lot of fun stuff with it. I actually used glitter pens for the ice cream itself. I'm not sure whether you can tell in the video, but they are a little bit glittery. And then one of the last little details I went in and added was loads of sprinkles over her hair and dress, which I think was a cute little addition. I think the dress was looking a little bit boring still before that step. So I'm glad I went in and did that. The pens that I used were a little bit dark, but I don't think it matters too much since I'd already made the decision to make this brighter than I'd originally planned. I think it ended up pretty good, especially after I went in with pencils and shaded it. I think it really made a difference on the face. I did a lot more blush. And I think it looks really cute in the end. So that's all the drawings from this week. It was only 6 drawings because I started the challenge on a Sunday. And I want to ideally post these weekly every Friday or Saturday, but next week it should be a full 7 drawings for the whole week. I'm just glad that I'm done with my first week of prompts. It was pretty exciting and also very nerve-wracking, but I'm glad that I'm still on schedule for now. I'm not sure if I still will be by next week, but we'll see. Anyway, that's it for this week's prompts, and I will hopefully be talking to you again next week when I've completed another week of prompts. Fingers crossed, hopefully. I'll be talking to you next week after finishing another week of prompts. Hopefully.